I'm Thomas Mills with Politics NC Podcast, and we're here today with Restless Natives, and we have our regular guest, Travis Fain, the former reporter for WRAL, as well as numerous other newspapers, and Anderson Clayton, the chair of the North Carolina Democratic Party. Guys, I appreciate you being here. So, let's jump into this thing. Phil Berger is the Senate President Pro Tem, arguably one of the most powerful men in the state, and he's been in that position for longer than anybody's ever held it. All of a sudden, it looks like he has a primary from a sheriff in Rockingham County that may be more popular than him. And a poll showed up in the last few weeks that shows Berger seriously trailing, is his name Sam Page? I think his Sam
That's
Page
right.
is the sheriff. So, Travis, why don't you jump in and tell us a little bit about the dynamics of that?
Yeah, so, I mean, this is mostly about casinos. And Senator Berger, 2 years ago, made a big push that was largely kind of secret for a while until it wasn't, to bring casinos to North Carolina outside of tribal lands. We have, casinos right now on tribal lands only. This would have authorized, I can't remember if it was four different places, including Rockingham County, which is his home district, Senator Berger's home district. And it wasn't popular there. People showed up at a meeting and pushed back really hard. The deal all fell apart. The House would not cooperate with Senator Berger in the Senate on the casino deal, and it just kind of went away. But I mean, there's fallout to that, right? And there's fallout locally. And as much as Senator Berger, as the Republican leader in the Senate, as much as his constituency is every other Republican senator, well, his first constituency is in Rockingham County, where he has to get reelected every 2 years. Sam Page is the sheriff of Rockingham County. He is a former Donald Trump state co-chair or something. I may not get the title right. Y'all have so many titles in this world, but he's a big Trump guy. And he looks like he's going to challenge Berger. That seems to be the plan. And this poll, which came out from Opinion Diagnostics, which is Patrick Sebastian's group, basically says Berger is running 18 points down from Page. Now, I will say, this looks a bit like a push poll to me. Now, I'm sure I'm going to get a call from somebody who's going to tell me that I don't understand polling and I use that word wrong. Okay. But it lays out a lot of positions that the pollster knew people would have a negative opinion of. But what it says is that once all those positions, once the poll respondents were educated properly, Berger went from being 18 down to 18 points down to 43 points down. So, okay, sure, yeah, 43 points. I'm sure that's how the Republican primary will go there in Rockingham County.
What do you think, Anderson?
I think that Phil Berger's made a lot of very unpopular decisions since he's been in the legislature. And to Travis's point, it was an Economic Development Commission meeting that they were in when Republicans from all across the county came and stood up and said that they were not for this deal going through because it had to go through at the county level too, not just at the state level, for them to allow this plot of land to be sold. And I think it's really, really interesting to see the internal fighting across the state right now with Republicans that would be typically more moderate Republicans versus a more Trump oriented Republican at the local level. And I really don't love the word MAGA. I know that's where Democrats have used it for I kind of hate it in some ways because I'm I do think there's a differentiation between the types of Republicans that we're seeing at the local level right now and what they want for the future of their party, and also what it used to look like for them in some ways. And so I think it's interesting, but it's also very telling, and it's something that we're seeing across the I mean, I'll be honest with you. Person County right now, our local Republicans just voted to censure one of their own Republicans on the county commission in my county. So I'm like, the infighting's real. It's happening everywhere. And I think that it's interesting to see how that's going to impact primaries and also elections in 2026 for Republicans across the state.
Isn't it nice, Anderson, when someone other than Dems are in disarray?
My God, isn't it? That's the same thing with the budget, right? It's like Republican, because the only people that you have to fight with are yourselves right now. Like, Democrats don't have power, and when you don't, you're able to shine a light pretty clearly on who is actually to blame and who's got control over what's happening right now in the state. And I think that, our state legislative Democrats have tried to do that as much as possible, is to say, this is not Dem on Republican anymore. This is Republican on Republican. And you've got to decide what type of Republican do you want to have leading the state right now, and what type of vision for the state do you have going forward, which I don't think Republicans in North Carolina know, which is why you won't see a state budget probably pop up this year. And we may be on this podcast later on, and y'all be calling me out on it, but I'm like, I'm not looking too good for the boys in Raleigh. I don't know.
I think we probably won't see a state budget. At least that's the way everybody who follows it closely, who's willing to speak, is speaking about it. That it's just the negotiations between the House and Senate, they're too far apart on the state budget, primarily over tax cuts and future tax cuts that they disagree on the pace of. But it'll be interesting to see how this Page-Berger race dynamic impacts things, because if I'm Speaker of the House, Destin Hall, if I'm the House Republican leadership, I'm looking at that and saying, okay, maybe Berger beats back this challenge and wins re-election in 2026. Maybe he doesn't. But what's clear is that it's going to have to take quite a bit of his attention, and it's going to cause quite a bit of chaos in his life, and thus chaos to some extent in the Senate Republican caucus. So maybe I just wait and watch that process play out, as opposed to in budget negotiations acceding to Senate demands that I otherwise would as part of the negotiating process. Maybe I just say, you know what? I see this situation trending bad for him and thus them. That means it's trending better for our negotiating positions. We'll wait them out, which is usually the Senate position, right? I mean, usually the state Senate has gotten the better of the House in negotiations like this, in part because the Senate is willing to be more patient.
We might see Destin Hall gain his wings, is what you're saying, Travis. I get it. I do.
He's smart. And careful what you wish for, Anderson, because he is a pretty smart guy.
I'll be honest with you, after the last thing that I just went through with Jefferson Griffin, I never underestimate how much Republicans are willing to stick play and do whatever they need to maintain power in this state, right. Travis. And they've been very successful at it with Senate Bill 382, right? Stripping away my governor power instead of giving Western North Carolina the relief that they need. I never underestimate, but I'm just like, maybe we'll see a little baby fly for once, Instead of letting Big Berger up there sit up there and make all the decisions for him. You know what I mean? Like, maybe the Republican Party will actually do a little something. Who knows?
I like the way that you mentioned stripping the power from the governor, because I think it relates to something earlier you said earlier about the way the legislature has gone about things, and obviously it's Republican controlled. Kind of Republicans own certain things, and when you continually strip away power from the Democratic governor, you just kind of you strengthen that feeling that you have ownership. So I mean, it better go well, and elections being one of those things, because of course they took state board of election appointment power away from the governor and gave it to the state auditor, primarily because the state auditor is a Republican.
I know. Just wait until I get Republicans or fighting Republicans on the county board of elections. Now that'll be a real treat.
Well, I want to get back to Rockingham County, outside of Raleigh a little bit. One of the things that I think Berger's got a problem with is his family has a lot of control there, and I think there's some resentment around that. His son's a county commissioner, his other son's on the Supreme Court, and I think there's he's been in power a very long time, and I think people start to get tired of that. And back to the casino thing, didn't his son take the lead on pushing that thing? And I think there's this idea that it's like, you guys are becoming a little bit too big for your britches. And the reality is Sheriff Page is a very popular man. And, he's saying, look, you guys, we need a change here. And if he makes that leap, I think there are a lot of people that are going to, if you got the choice between a guy who's been in the legislature for whatever it is, 25 years,
26.
versus a sheriff who's extremely
My entire
popular, I
life.
think they're going to take the sheriff. You know, the problem that you have as a legislature, nobody likes the legislature. You know, at the end of the day, everybody complains about Raleigh. So Page is not of Raleigh. He's of Rockingham County.
Makes it feel so real. I'm not kidding. I was like, oh wow, I'm 27. Like Phil Berger has been in the legislature since I was born, essentially.
Been there a long time, and you know, that's a lot of power in one county.
It is,
So,
and you know, I think your point about people become somewhat resentful of long held power and of families that hold power. Senator Berger's is it his oldest son, Phil Berger Jr. I'm not sure if he's where everybody is in the pecking order there, but you know, before he became a state Supreme Court justice, he ran for Congress in this area, and he lost Rockingham County, which was.
Right.
I think a surprise to a lot of outside observers, but you know, he had been district attorney in that county, and yeah, resentment grows. I think maybe I'm misattributing this to Phil Berger Jr., but I think he said something along the lines of, "You don't always get your father's friends, but you always get his enemies."
pretty wise stuff.
And
That's crazy.
that was like 15 years ago. My memory on that
No.
is not perfect, but I think it's a truism, regardless of where I first heard it.
It's crazy to think though that they have power at the county level, the state level, and at like the courts level in North Carolina, all within their family. To me,
I'm sure
right
it was
now.
totally unplanned. Anderson just kind of.
Oh, absolutely. But I mean, like it is wild that that's not the hottest think piece of anybody in the entire state right now. Is just like, and I think the Assembly honestly did a really good story on Phil Berger when it first, or earlier this year, or early last year, or something like that. I'm not sure, but I remember reading that. But I think about the context of how you nepotism and in something like that, and it just. I don't know, you got your son doing your dirty business out there at the county, and then you got your other son doing it up there in the courts. And I'm like, whoa,
Yep.
Daddy Berger really is protected.
That's a lot of power. Well, let's shift gears just briefly here. I want to talk about what Travis brought up, the fact that it looks like Josh Stein is coming out in support of marijuana, recreational marijuana use, at least taking a look at it. And I know we appointed a board to study it and see what can happen. Travis, you want to, again, tell us a little bit about the background on that stuff?
Yeah, the governor sat down, I think exclusively, with some of my former colleagues at WRAL earlier this week and said, I'm going to read from an AP story here that covered that interview, said he personally supports legalizing adult recreational use of marijuana and other intoxicating THC products, but he wants to see a structure put together that will keep it away from kids. Like, I don't know how many people know this, but if you go into a bar now, if you go into a restaurant, some stores, you can order like drinks and other products that have, you know, they have CBD in them. Some of them might have some THC in them. THC is, from my understanding of it, what gets you high from the marijuana plant. And like, it's not really regulated because there are all these different like, oh, well, it's over this percentage of this thing from the same plant. It's all very complicated, and just the regulations have not kept pace in North Carolina with what the industries involved are doing. And so Stein is saying, look, I'm putting together this committee. We've got to like get our hands around the Wild West here and regulate this stuff. But as part of that, you could see, I mean, clearly the governor has said that he supports recreational use for adults. So will that be part of whatever comes out of this? Also, what happens with medical marijuana, which is something the state Senate has voted for, but the House has not been willing to go along with. Bill Rabin, who is the Rules Chairman in the Senate, he has told a very powerful story. And he says that he does not think he would have survived a very serious cancer fight years ago if not for the medicinal properties of marijuana. He says he used it illegally and that he shouldn't have had to, that people should have this right, which I think is a very compelling argument that just has not gone with House Republicans at this point. But so, I mean, it's all these different kind of trains moving in very similar directions on marijuana, and the governor saying we've got to get a handle on this. We'll see what happens. I mean, obviously, he may get some headlines and he's got this committee, but ultimately it's the legislature that's going to have to drive the bus on this.
You have any thoughts, Anderson?
I was say I wish Senator Rabin would go tell the rest of his colleagues that in a way that is compelling, and maybe his Senate Majority Leader again, Phil Berger, because I'm like, could make anything happen. But I think that we're discounting the aspect of how much marijuana legalization will do for farmers across our communities, people that used to raise tobacco, people in rural North Carolina. I mean, Person County alone right now, hemp farms have grown, at least from the last couple of years. And so we're seeing more and more folks farming hemp as of now. But I'm like, I think that a lot of those farmers would love to get into more of a cash selling crop where they could actually be able to raise off of it and still produce in areas like this that would impact just the ability to keep small farmers in business right now. I mean, we got to adapt with the times, and I think that we're behind it 100%. And also just looking at it, to Travis's point, not just the health benefits of it, but just the economic benefits, right? Like Colorado, when they legalized it, you had millions of more dollars that were able to be put in your public schools. And I'm like, if Republicans want to defund my public schools to give private school vouchers all day long, at least they should be able to legalize something that will help put money back into the coffers for teachers and for bus drivers and for people that are working in our lunchrooms and supporting our children all over the state right now, in my opinion.
Anderson, do you have a sense of why farming communities around the state have not pushed harder for this? Or maybe they have and I've missed it. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know that I've seen just a really broad push from farmers on this issue. I mean, is there anything that I should understand better there?
I don't think that small farmers are having the time to make it to Raleigh to go advocate for this. I mean, genuinely, like most of the people that I talk to right now in rural places are like, I don't have the time to drive 3 hours to Raleigh to go tell people what I need out here. I need them to come to me. And that's where I say, like, it is the fault of the legislature right now that is in place for not hearing constituents and hearing the fact that, and a lot of times too, like there's THC, honestly, when you're seeing all of the like, CBD stores like pop up across like rural North Carolina right now too, especially out in the mountains at this moment in time. Like I think a lot of folks out there are obviously for it, but it's almost legal weed basically at this point that folks are selling in those stores across North Carolina. And I'm forgetting, and this is my naivety here of just like what law allowed for that to happen, but it was some sort of like, so I think some people are starting to do that, at least from what I understand, just like secretively, because they're like, we don't want Republicans to change the law, which I guess on this I'm announcing it in a way that I maybe shouldn't for them, but I'm like, I think that they're like, we're cool with how it's going right now if that's the way that we have to, but legalizing it would open up a lot more opportunities for federal grants to come down for it, like for farmers to be able to do more with what they can grow. And I think that's where we're missing sort of the market right now on it. But it's not like it's not being sold probably in your backyard legally, to be real with you.
It seems pretty clear that I'm not a big government regulation guy, but I mean, it seems pretty clear that we have dropped the ball and failed to adequately respond to the obvious market that exists.
I mean, I remember being out I was in Clay County and like in the middle of downtown of their, and this is bad now because I'm forgetting what city I was in, Brattlesboro maybe or something like that. But we were in down, and there's a CBD store that popped up right there. I was like, when did they start selling this? Like, it's amazing to me how where I've been out and where I've seen these stores pop up on Main Street. That's sort of like the tides are changing. And I remember being in even Swain County and sitting at a booth across from somebody, it was Republicans, and I overheard their conversation, right? Because I was by myself and I was listening in, and they were talking about how much like they wanted legalization of marijuana to happen. Like it's cross-party to me in so many ways. I just don't understand why we haven't in some ways adapted with it. But
one thing that's happened, North Carolina's always a little bit slow with a lot of new legislation, or a lot of times slow with new legislation. And I think what's happened now is we've gotten enough data from other states that have had it legal for so long that we kind of know what's wrong. A lot of the worst case scenarios in places like Colorado that adapted early, Oregon, Washington, haven't come true. You haven't seen any sort of really, really bad results. There have been some, but understanding what does go wrong gives you the opportunity to do what we're doing now and start to put things in place to try to mitigate the negative impacts and kind of pick up the positive impact, most of which is revenue. And it's a complicated situation because we're kind of behind the ball on it. There's already a pretty substantial industry, and there's a big fight in the industry about who's going to control it. It's like you've got a few very large corporations that want to come in and they tell the states, hey, look, we'll handle the whole thing. You just get out of our way and you let us do it. And a lot of times what they do is they cut the local folks out. All of a sudden you're not owned. The distributors aren't owned by local North Carolinians. The farm, the marijuana itself is coming from grown in other states, sometimes in other countries, and you want to stop that. If you're going to legalize something like this, you want the benefit to be widespread. You want more than just the tax benefit from it. You want the economic benefit from it too.
If, to your point, a couple of years ago, the medical marijuana bill, as it was constituted then, there was a lot of criticism because it appeared to have been written really to favor large entities that would be coming from out of state as opposed to smaller farms. So that's certainly something that needs to be thought of. I think politically, though, it's real smart for Stein to be on this issue. He's obviously been careful about the way he's said things, and like I'm not saying, like I'm kind of saying without saying that I'm for the legalization of it, but really what I want is this council, this deeper look, to take a look at something that we have kind of dropped the ball on in the General Assembly. So I think it's smart politically, because I think this is a winning issue, particularly for Democrats looking to win over a wide variety of voters.
Yeah. Also, I was in Hayesville, Brattleboro's in Edgecombe County, where I have also been in this week. But I was sitting there and I was like, man, I'm gonna mess that up so badly. So I'm sorry to my Clay County folks out there.
You can't remember everything when you're everywhere all at once, Anderson.
Well, speaking of that, Anderson, so you've been around rural North Carolina again this week. What are you hearing out there, and what are you seeing? I've got some thoughts about kind of voter turnout in those areas. What are people saying out there right now?
Yeah, we're doing a 50 county tour of rural North Carolina right now, and that's just eastern counties. And so we're going to be moving out to the western counties in August and September. So June through July, I'm doing all of sort of the eastern counties that you were talking about earlier, Travis, Thomas, that were losing population and that are also trending redder in some of the southeastern counties that are gaining population too. And so northeastern North Carolina is really interesting to me because it's Don Davis's district, right? And he is slowly but surely the only Democrat that we have had be very successful, I feel like, in being able to maintain G.K. Butterfield's representation up there too. And that district is in sliding, shifting more towards the right in the last 4 to 5 election cycles that we've seen. And for me, I really wanted to go because a lot of those counties are majority minority counties. We've got 18 rural majority minority counties left in the state. We have 20 majority minority counties all over in North Carolina, but 2 of them are urban, right? When you're looking at Durham and Mecklenburg. And so the aspect of that was trying to be able to understand what's happening in these counties. What are Democrats honestly out there hearing on the ground? And so Edgecombe County was first up, and we got to hear and bring out Justice Earls. We had Senator Candy Smith out there with us, and Representative Glorstein Brown was there too, and Toby Hampson, who's one of our Court of Appeals judges that's up for re-election in 2026. And honestly, a lot of the folks that were there had said, we never got to see people that were on the ballot out here. And I think that a ton of what I talk about with rural North Carolina is about showing up again as Democrats, because it has been such an area that folks just don't want to see a face on a TV screen. They want to see you in their communities. They want to see you at a church service on a Sunday. They want to see you at a Rotary Club meeting introducing yourself to folks. And when you've got 100 counties in the state, I know for my candidates, it can be hard to do that. And so a lot of this was us getting the first glance out there of who are the people in the community that we need to be talking to? Where are the places that we can be introducing our candidates that's going to be the most bang for their time too? And then also, I heard a lot from folks about being scared about what's happening with federal cuts right now. Healthcare access was the biggest thing, talking about Martin County losing their hospital. We had folks that came from Martin to that Edgecombe town hall that we had, just wanting to hear from folks about, what are we doing to sort of increase access in this community again? Because a lot of when you see your healthcare decline in a community, you also see people leave that community. And it's the same thing when you see schools closing. It's the same thing when your local hospital closes, you feel like you don't have a community left around it anymore. And I feel like that's been the main sort of thought that I've heard throughout Eastern North Carolina. And then Halifax County was really cool to me because I got to tour the first ever Center for Energy Education. And there's a lovely woman there named Mosine who ended up working with a solar company that came into Halifax and bought an old airport there. And it ended up turning the airport into a solar farm. But the solar company wanted to give something back to the county. And so they gave this energy education center back to it and they renovated it. And now Mosine runs it. It's completely grant funded. It is not done by any state money or any federal money. And I just thought it was cool because it's like, that's the way to me to talk about how do you build up rural economic development, because Mosine now runs coding classes out of there. They do internship programs, and it's all for high school students in Halifax County, but also they're having interns that are coming from across the state that want to be there, that want to learn about clean energy in a rural community. And I was just amazed because I was like, I've never heard anything about this. I said, does Patrick Woody from the Rural Center know that you exist? Like, I said, this is the model for every rural county to be utilizing, and I just don't think that enough people know about it. And that was the other thing that I've sort of, I knew it, but it just got cemented into my brain of that silos exist and we are all in them. And the counties that we have that are doing amazing things to try to bring back economic development to their communities that will bring population density back there and everything else are not getting the sort of airtime that we need them to right now. And so I think part of what I'm trying to do too is just amplify like what good people are doing in rural counties too while I'm on this thing. Sorry, that was a long spiel.
That energy center is very cool. I have some clients in the solar industry, so I'm familiar with it, and I think it's an important part of helping people understand how rural North Carolina fits in to a broader economic picture. I mean, there's the strings are kind of coming off in our world to where you can do almost anything from almost anywhere. As long as there's electricity, broadband, water, it's going to be really cool, I think, in the coming years in North Carolina and everywhere, particularly in rural areas.
Yeah. No, I mean, she does too. Like, they've got a walk center around it, so like people can come get their exercise. There's a community garden. There's just they come in and they're teaching people how to install solar panels too. So they're sort of creating an education base for Eastern North Carolina for this type of energy. And I was just like, do people know that you exist? I'm like, they've got to. I know they've got to, but I didn't. And I was like, I feel like I've been in like all over rural North Carolina the last 2 years, but it was the first time I'd ever seen something like it. And I was just like, oh, this would be neat to be able to show. Like, Person County's got a solar moratorium right now. And so I was like, maybe if you showed Republican county commissions or county commissioners what this could look like too, I was like, maybe it would also help them understand the opportunity that comes along with, either way, if a farmer wants to lease their land, they're going to potentially, maybe not in my county, but in other ones. And so I'm like, how do we make this happen in a way that is actually good for the county too, and the community gets something from it, not just the clean energy,
I was looking at, I think it's important that you're in rural North Carolina. I think Democrats really have to start to connect with those voters that at one point were pretty solid. A lot of them were pretty solidly Democrat, and they're hemorrhaging votes down in those areas. And I've been kind of going over the 2024 electorate. And when you look at it, for Democrats, they have problems with their base. The African American voters voted at, their turnout was about 66%. The turnout was about 74%. And in 2020, the African American electorate was 68%. So you're seeing a decreasing number of African American voters. And when you look at a map of North Carolina, where they're not voting are in those counties you're talking about. They're all up across the Northeast. And I think Democrats have lost touch with a certain portion of working class, culturally conservative African American voters, and they have to be able to talk to them about things that are important to them. And the type of thing that's important to them is jobs, creating economic opportunity. And I think Republicans have done a very good job of defining Democrats in their minds as kind of outside of their comfort zone on cultural issues around LGBT issues, to some extent abortion, transgender rights. And Democrats need to break through that, because if they can cut the margins that they're losing rural counties by, they can do a lot. They can do a lot more at statewide in statewide elections.
I mean, what also impacts though? Let's get real. Because, like, I hear you, Thomas, on all of it. My state's gerrymandered. Like, Howard Hunter used to represent the counties that I was in this last week. You know what I mean? And I think, like, it matters how much our state legislature and our state Supreme Court that have been Republican dominated have taken away power from black communities in Eastern North Carolina to actually have representation in Raleigh that wants to get them the constituency services that they need to believe that government works for them. Because that's what's happening right now when you see Halifax and Warren and Northampton counties having someone like Representative Rodney Pierce in charge of those counties and being out there with the Halawassaponi tribe and trying to help our state legislature understand what's going on in these counties. But I'm like, all politics is local. And what Republicans in my state have done so well is they have been able to to segregate, right, the electorate from their representatives in Raleigh. It's made them feel like, well, why should I turn out and vote? No one ever shows up out here to care about me. And I'm like, hell, I'm trying. But it's like, actually, it's the fact that and that's what they did. Republicans in 2010, when they sat down and took control of the state, they said, where has the Democratic Party maintained power? Eastern North Carolina. And we're going to go in and gerrymander them the hell out of having that representation in Raleigh. And they did that. And they made that area of North Carolina feel more and more distanced from Raleigh, even though the 2 and 3 hours or the hour that separates them from it. And I'm like, that is power in and of itself. And when we get maps that are different in 2028, when Democrats hold a seat in 26, when we take 3 Republican seats in 28 on that Supreme Court, and we return the unrigging of our state, honestly, and give power back to people, then I think folks can look at me and say, no, Anderson, it's the issues that you need to backtrack on versus like, it's the system that's working against people right now to want to vote for your party because like they don't see it working for them. And I'm like, you're talking about majority black counties. Like these are the folks that have voted. They had Democratic representation. Democrats we got re-gerrymandered, lost 4 Democrats from Eastern North Carolina alone. Like it matters. Because I hear everything else on the issues, topics, and stuff, and I hear the jobs part of it. I'm like, I think that's how Josh Stein was successful. I think that's how a lot of folks in our state are able to make the case. But I'm like, gerrymandering is a real factor of how Republicans have dismantled Eastern North Carolina's power and also their ability to see government in a light that is good for them, I think.
I think you got to remember, though, that, and I may screw up which election cycle this was. It was several years ago. The map for the North Carolina House of Representatives, passed with majority Democratic support. And we held an election under that map, and Republicans, I think that was the cycle they came within 1 seat of the supermajority, and then Tricia Cotham switched.
And you know what, Travis? I disagreed with my Democrats on whether or not that map was fair. So, like, you know... we got our own infighting potentially, but I'm like, no. Do I think that no, like not at all.
I will not argue that there hasn't been gerrymandering. There clearly has. I will,
and I think my state Supreme Court would vote differently now, knowing what Republicans have done too from that.
Right. I will argue that I still think that I do not see a path to a majority in the General Assembly for Democrats, regardless. Maybe I'll be wrong, but any sort of plan that has like all the things you ticked off as that require success is a tough plan to execute. You don't have another option. I'm not saying.
I was like, they put me in this place, Travis. I'm just trying to get us out of it. Like I'm like this party right now, and that's what I tell National Democrats. I'm like, look. Like, I'm looking at 28 or I'm looking at the next decade in the situation that I find myself in right now. And I'm not trying to have that happen. And that is what, like, I don't think the Republicans are as hungry as this party is right now. Maybe I'll be wrong on that one and folks can call me to it. But I'm like, I know what we got to do. And they know what we've got to do. And so I'm like, all right, well, who's going to win it out? Like, that's where it is right now. Well, that's why they wanted to hold a Supreme Court seat so badly with Allison Riggs, right? It's why the 734 mattered to them just as much as it mattered to me. So,
well, I think one thing National Democrats would do well to go look at North Carolina and a handful of other states where Democrats seem to do well at the state level, and understand that our state level politicians tend to talk about things that matter to people. And I think a lot of times our federal politicians are talking about things that aren't that important to a lot of folks. And they're focused more on kind of their, what I would say are special interests. they're focused on things that are kind of big picture issues, and most folks are really concerned about kitchen table issues. The people that determine elections are folks that are not heavily involved in politics. They're not sitting there living it day to day. They're people that are going, okay, how do I get this bill paid? How am I going to get my kids to school? And trying to talk to them on those levels makes a big difference. And I think Democrats in North Carolina have done a good job. I mean, the gerrymandering here is criminal, and there's no question about that. I mean, it really, as I call it, we don't really have, we have what I call a veneer of democracy. Everybody gets to vote, but we already know how the election's going to turn out for the most part, because they've rigged the elections. And when you start seeing us vote at statewide levels, our Democrats are winning. We've held the governor's seat since the only time we lost it was 2012 this century. So.
Someone got mad at me the first time I ever got in this job. One of my first TV interviews that I did, I had said rigged. Like, I had said that Republicans had rigged this state. And people were so, I know, scared of that being. And I was like, but it's the truth. Like, I don't know. It is. Like, I don't know another way to say it. And maybe there is that'll sound better to somebody else out there. But I'm like, I think we could just be honest about it. And we ain't got to, we don't have to sugarcoat it.
Here's the difference. Republicans try to rig the outcome. I mean, they complain about the outcome being rigged. We're talking about before it ever happens, it's rigged. That's the difference. What we're seeing right now is we know the outcome of almost every legislative and congressional district in a state that's 50-50. And it's going to benefit Republicans. Back to you're talking about Don Davis's district. They were so swift in the way they did their gerrymandering that the one district that's a swing district is one that's actually trending more Republican than Democratic. So there's a possibility, if we can't fix it by the end of the election cycle, that they have an 11-3 majority in a state that's 50-50.
And stretches from Granville County to Pasquotank. Like, someone needs to get real. Don Davis has 22 counties in that district. And he's in every single one of them, mind y'all. The man does his road. He knows what showing up looks like in those counties, which is why he wins an election by 6,000 votes, to your point, in a district that's trending redder. But I'm just like, it is, it. And I get it. Travis is looking at me like, Democrats did it too, Anderson. Don't you forget this. And I'm like, I've not forgotten it. But I'm also like, this party is saying, give me an independent redistricting commission. Let me do that give me 7 and 7 again. And let me play it out for the 15th one that we're going to add to it after the 2030 census comes down. I'm like, that's what I want to see as competitive, is we're actually fighting for power in this state. The Supreme Court used to look like that. It used to be, and the Court of Appeals used to look like that, where it was 8 and 7 on the Court of Appeals, and that balance of power would go back and forth, because that is what North Carolina represents. And I'm like, now you have a minority on the Court of Appeals for, 12 Republicans and 3 Democrats, and all 3 of those Democrats are up in 2026, y'all. So I need you to come out and help me get them out to, or get the voters out to vote for them. That's what my other plea is. My Court of Appeals races.
Right. The other thing is when Democrats controlled the courts, they also slapped down the legislature over gerrymandering at times. It wasn't like Republicans in control of the court basically rubber stamp anything that the Republican legislature does, as far as I can tell. I haven't seen them really come back and say anything. And
well, full circle moment, right back to what we were talking about at the beginning. Senator Berger, right, calls his son and goes, "Hey, you got to help us out here."
Well, I cannot get my head around the fact that 4 members of the North Carolina Supreme Court voted to change the rules of an election after it was over. How do you do that? in what world are you living in that you believe that that's somehow fair?
To quote Justice Earls, because they're constitutional conservatives, which means they will ignore the Constitution in order to become more conservative.
Right.
Like,
Yeah. Okay. Well, guys, I really appreciate it. We've gone longer than we've gone in the past, but I think we had a lot to talk about. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Anderson, thanks so much for being here. Travis, I appreciate it. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. This is Thomas Mills signing off for Politics NC.